This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. It is I, Old Gingerface, coming at you. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for all the listening that's going on, all the binge listening. I always appreciate that. And thank you for all the recent follows. I'm trying to build up the social media around the podcast, trying to get the word out. I've been at the podcast for a while now, 4 years, and have not been the best about kind of getting the word out there. So the natural growth has been good and steady, but I'm trying to do a better job at letting people know about it. So more people can hear these incredible stories from the men and women in law enforcement and, get an appreciation for what it is they actually do. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all the Patreon support. We just recently did a live stream last week. It was really fun. People showed up, interacted with us, had a great time. And that will be in the future. All the live streams will be live and available to everybody. And then afterwards, they'll be posted to a podcast, like an RSS feed to just Patreon. And also the video will be available only to Patreon members. So if you really love the show, and you always have, and you listen to a bunch of episodes, and you want to show me how much you love it, Patreon's the place to do it. It's in the show notes. So today's guest is a great one. I'm very excited to ask him a bunch of questions, not just the big questions I normally ask, but the guy's got a really, really incredible career behind him. He was in law enforcement for 23 years. About 15 of those, he worked in some type of undercover capacity. He worked 2 very long-term, deep undercover cases, one embedded with the mafia and the other with domestic terrorists, for a total of 3 years, and received the Medal of Valor for his work. Without further ado, let me bring on the great Matt Pitcher. Matt!
What's going on? I'm not sure about great, but I appreciate it anyway.
Too late. I've already looked into your stuff, my man. So yeah, I've seen a lot of the stuff popping up. They covered one of your cases on A&E, and you're kind of popping off right now, which is great, especially for like, you get out of law enforcement, you're like, I gotta get some kind of trickle of something from somewhere else. Why not? If you can make it, if you had a great, exciting career, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Just bottle up that magic and let it out,
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't smart enough to do it directly following my law enforcement career. I did the whole, what now, that knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
And then some other people were smarter than me and said, hey, let me tell you what you need to do. And they got me on the right path.
We need those people in our lives. I always say that to people. They're like, hey, why don't you do this? I'm like, I'm just a dumb cop. What are you telling me?
Exactly.
Tell me how to do it.
I mean, you've seen the dumb stuff I've done in my career. I can't be that smart to do that stuff.
So I noticed on Instagram, you haven't been in there all that long, and your following's is great. It's really building up. I mean, when you do a career that involves deep cover and you're kind of living another life, how long was it before you felt safe to like actually make a social media account, to actually put yourself out there? Was it a long time or?
So what's today's date? So
I feel in danger at all times.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's like, I get that question nonstop now, right? And I don't know if there's a specific time. Like, so the last deep cover case I did finished in September of 2000. Well, technically, the first case finished after my second case in 2014. I went, and keep in mind, there was some mental health stuff. I wasn't good about talking about it for a long time.
Sure.
But then also, yeah, you didn't want anybody to know. And you don't know how people are going to respond to it, whether they're going to be taken back by you or
Right.
be accepting of the kind of work you did.
I'm a sovereign citizen. I don't agree with that.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
That, and wait, so you basically pretended to be somebody else, betrayed people who you were close friends with, and now I'm supposed to trust you and be your friend? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate reaction. You can't argue it too much.
Yeah.
But so I didn't, besides my wife, I didn't tell anybody really anything about the cases. They knew, obviously, you disappear, people know something's up. Um, I didn't tell anybody about the cases besides, yes, I did deep cover assignments until about 2022. Um,
Oh,
and
wow.
then, yeah, and social media wise, so Facebook I had really, really locked down. I did a little bit of a presence on Facebook because I kept it pretty far locked down. I mean, it's still kind of locked down, just because I wanted to keep in contact with my brothers and sisters who were still back in Charlotte, North Carolina,
Hmm.
and I wanted to, um, but keep it somewhat safe as I could. So I was very picky about who I was friends with,
Yeah,
everything.
and just be
I,
normal, right? Like have a social media
yeah,
account like everybody else is, like seeing everybody's lives.
yeah, exactly. Like it's funny because until then, the only pictures you find of me on social media did not have my real name attached to them,
Yeah.
because like when you work, and that's one thing that's terrifying about deep cover cases, is normal undercover work. There's no reason for your picture to be taken. You don't have to worry about that side of thing. When you're now becoming best friends with these people and you're spending 24/7 with them, you can't sit there and say, no, no, don't take my picture all the time. You're supposed to be this guy's best friend. And
Right.
so my picture was all over social media from other people taking it.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that's a problem.
yeah, that's what I worry in the future that, I mean, I think it may already be this way, that working a case that way, which is long run probably healthier not to, but is not going to happen anymore because you just can't. I mean, think of facial recognition now.
Yeah.
Super dangerous. Um,
Yeah, and people are there. We I was a part of some investigation. One of them with a biker club and motorcycle club, and these freaking guys were putting stuff on their Instagrams, like stolen property and stuff. And it was like, wow, you think you would know better? Like you're a criminal. Like you belong to a
exactly.
criminal motorcycle gang.
Let's try and use a little common sense.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That I mean
Uh,
that is crazy, man. And you were throughout your deep cover ones. Were you married, or was it the same woman you were with the whole time?
yeah. So my wife is, we talked about this a little bit ahead of time. She's an angel, legitimately. I have no clue why she's with me. Maybe she's not as smart as I think she is. I'm not sure, but I. So when I did the first deep cover assignment, we had a 6 month old, um,
Wow.
and I disappeared. Yeah, and and just prior to disappearing, I had blown my knee out and had to have ACL surgery from playing football. And so she was already taking care of him for the most part for those 4 months while I got healed a little bit. And so I go back to work and then immediately fall into this. And well, I'm going to be gone for a couple of years. Of course, I didn't know it was going to be a couple of years. They said going to be gone. I'm not really sure
Wow.
the length on this.
That dude,
Uh,
that's a crazy thing to wrap your mind around. Because I mean, most
yeah,
women, when they marry a cop, they understand like, all right, there's going to be screwed up hours. He's going to see some screwed up things. He's going to be in danger. Like it's going to be a lot. Most women probably don't bank on. He's going to be a deep cover informant or detective, and I'm not going to see him for years. I mean, that's a. I mean, did you when you started as a copper? Was this your goal, or did you kind of back into it?
no, this was, and I tell this part because it's hilarious and also shows how dumb I am. I started as a failed actor. Uh, so I was going to college, and at the time, my parents lived in Wilmington, North Carolina,
Hmm.
which was not far from where I went to college. And at that time, Wilmington, North Carolina actually had a big movie studio, and they filmed Dawson's Creek there
Right.
and a bunch of movies. Well, I learned that, hey, you can get paid $50 a day to be an extra in a movie and get to be in a movie. I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. That'd just
Yeah.
be fun. So,
For a kid,
so I
yeah.
go to
Hell yeah.
yeah, exactly, right? So I go to the casting place, and the lady's there, like, well, have you ever thought about acting? And I was like, well, no, but I'm not opposed.
Yeah.
And she handed me a list of agents and said, hey, these are the ones that we work with consistently. I think you'd be good. give them a call. So I ended up getting hooked up with two agents who were really cool, good people. Um, and at that time, I was very early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And they're like, well, the one agent who I got close to was like, I think you'd have a lot of success out in LA. We'd already gone up to New York a little bit. She goes, I think you'd have a lot of success out in LA. Would you move out there? I'm going to set you up with some people to talk to, some other agents, and get out there. Well, young and dumb, why not?
Yeah.
So one year I left of college, I decided, forget it, I'm going to go give this a shot. I'm going to make my debut, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, so I take, my mom was nice enough to let me borrow her car, drive it the whole way across the country to
I love
LA.
it.
You're not going to realize, LA is really expensive to live at.
I've heard that. I heard whispers of that.
Yeah. So I get out there. The only place I can afford is this rundown motel owned by a family in Compton.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
again, young and dumb, which I don't know if the dumb part ever changes, but anyway, yeah, I was at least young and
Yeah,
dumb at that
white boy
time.
in Compton.
Yeah, what can go wrong there too, right? So that's where I'm staying. And meanwhile, my brother's already become a cop back in Wilmington. And growing up, I'd always, I was interested in the CIA, becoming a spy, until you really start to do some reading there and you find out, like police work, 99% of it is paperwork, and that they don't really actually do a lot of spying.
Yeah.
It's more informant
It's a
type
select
work, if you
few.
will.
The rest are admin.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you really want to get to do it, you better be able to speak a lot of languages.
Yeah.
Not really my forte either. So that kind of was like, well, that's probably not going to happen. My brother, meanwhile, became a police officer in Wilmington, North Carolina. He's telling me about the foot chases he gets in and stuff like that, and then a little bit about some of the guys that work undercover that he knows. And I also, and I forget which book it is, but I get to read a little bit about deep cover type stuff where you do the long-term undercover cases. Uh, and I was blown away, like instantly, like that's what I'm gonna do. Meanwhile, I'm out in LA. Well, there was an earthquake at that time. I was out in LA at Joshua Tree, and it shook Compton. And I called my brother up that night. I was like, "Hey, what do I do? There's an earthquake." And he's like, I think you're supposed to get in the bathtub or something like
Yeah.
that."
Come
Which,
home.
by the way, yeah, that's horrible advice. So we got the aftershock, and I was like, well, screw it, I'm just gonna go outside. So I go outside, and people start shooting off guns. I was like, screw it, I'm gonna go back inside.
Oh my
By the next
gosh.
day, I was like, you know what, this is not working for me, and put into CMPD, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. Literally, I think it was the very next day, and you don't get hired right away. There's a whole process, but put that in and took off.
Yeah.
And then I think it was 1 or 2 months later, I got the conditional offer and started the road.
Nice. And you're like, that's my path in. I mean, that's a
Yep,
great place to start too if you're looking for specialties, because it's a big metro agency. There's going to be a lot of options for you to take.
exactly. And it was funny when I did my interview with them, they asked, well, do you know what you want to do in the department? No hesitation. Absolutely. I want to be an undercover in vice and narcotics. I want to be on the SWAT team, and I want to be a chaplain. And the guy like froze for a second.
Nice.
He's like, all right, well, I get the first two, but I've never heard the third one thrown in there too. Well, that's what I want.
Yeah. I want to eject people from their bodies and give them the blessing.
Exactly, right? You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, dude, that's beautiful, man. I love that. That's really cool. A good friend of mine, Ken Roybal, was a LAPD copper. He's retired now, and he's on the podcast once in a while. And he was a chaplain for a while at LAPD, and I think it was a lot. I think it was a lot to handle with like the amount of like funerals and stuff that were going on, and I mean, it's a very worthwhile endeavor, and I'm a Christian myself, so I think it's awesome. But that would be a lot if you pulled all three of those off.
How's 1 for 3? Is that pretty good? Because
That's
that's
pretty
what we
good.
ended up going with.
Hey, you could
Like
be a local. Like, I don't know where you are now, but you could be if you're in a smaller town and they don't have a chaplain, you could be the local chaplain. You know?
they do have one, but I've actually thought on coming on board that like just volunteering because like right now because I retired from the agency, but I'm a reserve just so I can do negotiations as one of
Yeah,
their hostage negotiators. Um, but I've thought about doing that as well. It's funny you said that. Yeah.
dude, that'd be friggin' amazing. That's awesome. What a good way to serve. You know?
Yep.
Very cool. So Matt, you get on Charlotte Bird Charlotte Mecklenburg. You do some years in patrol, and I definitely want to get into the undercover stuff. But when you were a young patrolman, can you remember the first call you went to that like really got your blood pumping? Your first hot call?
So I can tell you the first time I ran blue lights, and you'll probably relate to this totally, is it was a foot chase, right? Guy calls in, hey, I got one running 28th Street in Graham, right? I think that was the exact location. So I'm not even getting to drive. It's my first night. I'm with my training officer on the very first night. And so he's driving, but you know how instantaneous you can literally feel the adrenaline just kind of go throughout your body.
Yeah,
And
you're
you're
like,
like, all right, it's game on. It's time to roll.
yeah,
uh, and so this happens so much of the time, and it's so disappointing. You know, you get those blue lights on, you're flying that way because it's one of your boys, so you're going to get there as fast as possible, safely. And you get within that half mile, and in 72, he's under arrest. You know, he's in cuffs. It's over, and it's just that, oh, man, I didn't even get to make it there.
yeah. You got all those chemicals running through your blood.
Yep. And then that was the first night. The second night with this training officer was probably the next exciting thing. And I was getting to drive this night, and he had me do a traffic stop. Uh, and all the warning signs that you learn were there. I was my second night on the job, so I was able to miss at least 99% of them. Uh, so I get out of the car, approach the car, and I'm trying to do everything textbook, you know, get that fingerprint on the back,
Sure.
check the car out really well on the way up. And he hands me an ID card when I get up there. It doesn't look like him at all. Um, so, being the smart guy I am, I wave to meet my FTO at the back of the car so he can tell me what would be the logical next step instead of saying, "Hey, buddy, get out of the car."
Right.
So he tells me, "Well, we should probably go ahead and get him out of the car so we can talk to him and get him away from a moving object."
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like solid advice. I'll do that. So I go back up there, and keep in mind, second night on the job, academy. You know, we were I say militaristic academy. Very, you know, you get yelled at some, nothing like the military though. I don't want to compare it. I mean, it's not. They try to make it a little bit like boot camp, but it's not nearly
Yeah.
as stringent, I would say. But we did PT every morning. You had to look sharp. You had to have creases. You had to have your boots better have been completely polished.
Yeah.
That
Mine
kind
was
of
the
thing.
same, like paramilitary type of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Uh, so I still had my academy shoes I wore, the Bates, which you know look great. I mean, Bates are very sharp looking shoes.
Yep.
Did I mention it had been raining this night some? So I get them to the back of the car, and I'm trying, you know, textbook. I got this. I did great in the academy. I should have this down pat. I get the way they taught us to hold his hands behind his back when we're doing a search or when we're patting down for a weapon. Uh, so I mean, I'm flying. I'm doing great. I've got this nailed. And I didn't tell him to spread his feet though. I let him keep his feet pretty close together. This was the last time I ever let somebody keep their feet pretty close together. So I go to pat him, and all of a sudden, I don't know if he must have just slipped a little bit or something, but he kicks me right in my shin. Pretty good
Ooh.
kick. And then he takes off running. Eh,
See you later.
I, li- I literally look at my FTO and I'm like, he's like, well, now's usually when we chase him. So also, I was pretty proud of myself at this point. I was one of the faster ones in my academy class. I had good speed, you know, played football for a lot of years, that kind of thing. So I was looking forward to this. My FTO was, you know, 20 years older than me. So I should smoke him. This isn't going to be an issue. Um, Again, did I mention it had rained that night and I was wearing Bates shoes with slip on? So I have my mic pack on, of course, so that all our interaction is recorded, not video, just audio back in that day. But we take off running, and I'm ahead of my FTO, no problem. I should have this guy in no time. And then I slip, and I slide, and I fall. And then, oh, sorry about that. Um, and then I found something else that they never had taught us in the academy. And that is when you're chasing a guy and you come to a fence and he goes over that fence, how exactly do you get over that fence? Uh,
Yeah, with all your junk
so
on and all that.
exactly. my FTO, no problem. He does it the way that he taught me right after that how you do it, where you just put it like right here on your chest and kind of do the roll and let the vest take the brunt.
Yep.
Um, that's not how I did it. I
You throw
tried to
those feet up
pull my
above her.
exactly right. It's just a hurdle.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. I'll be
Yeah.
fine. Only I'm not fine. And so I slam on the ground again. I must have fallen 5 times in a 200-yard foot chase.
Oh, the
And of course,
uniform's all jacked up.
yep, my FTO caught him. I think he already had the handcuffs on by the time I get there. I'm completely humiliated. And he says, "Well, this is a great training experience. Let's go back and listen to um, the VHS and all that." Because I mean, the front camera records the video, but then you can hear the whole foot chase. All you hear is constantly, "Oof," and then get back up, "Oof," get back up the whole entire time. For some reason, he thought it was also important for the rest of the squad to hear that
Oh,
video.
of course. Yeah. Good training moment to share with everybody.
Exactly. So that was my first, I'd say, hot call, like where I had the adrenaline going and chasing somebody,
Dude, I love it.
making a fool of myself at the same time.
It's classic. Yeah, that's classic. Like Bill Broadway, a buddy of mine who came on, um, he when he was in field training, they pulled up to a guy for a foot chase, and his FTO just looked at him and said, "Get him!" Like he was the canine, you had to get out of the car and start running.
Exactly. It's just so funny because you don't, yeah, it's a new world at that point, right? You're just
Yeah.
not accustomed to it.
Yep, I remember those feelings too. I remember like the first couple of times you go hands on with somebody, like it's time to muckle them, kind of like
Yep.
it's a weird thing to take somebody's freedom away and like to grab their arms, because before you do anything else, you gotta touch them, and just being with the senior guys that just see how they do it. They give, and what I gleaned from it was like most guys would give the guy the opportunity. And then when they didn't, then it was like full blast. It was like they wouldn't give him a chance. It was like bam against the car, wrenching arms. Like you can't like do this like, come on, like grab their arm impishly.
Exactly.
You kind of, but that's really weird to do when you've never done it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you feel like kind of like a, I don't know, you're just kind of unsure yourself. So I love these early stories people have because they're just so funny. It's just everybody goes through it. So Matt, you get broken in. How long before you get into detectives?
So, and I always say this with a caveat, like detectives, it was 2007 is when I switched over to vice and narcotics. I was on a street crimes unit though, doing undercover and working informants starting in 2004, I believe it was. So that was my start in undercover work. Well, besides being, I started in police in 2000. Um, I had come up with an idea because, like I said, I knew from the get go what I wanted to do. So like, I was fortunate. I got to go to the most violent area in Charlotte, so I was going to get my opportunities to learn, um, and I was going to do everything I could to point myself into vice and narcotics. And again, I don't condone this. This was stupid on my part. My sergeant messed up by letting me do it, and I always caveat it because it was dumb. I was out of FTO maybe 6 months, and this was real big when community policing was. I mean, I know community policing is still very big, but this was when they were using the Sarah model a lot. And I don't even remember exactly what the Sarah model stood
Yeah,
for.
getting all kinds of money from the federal government for it, and
Exactly. So they wanted us to come up with these Sarah models, so I came up with one. And this was, you know, I know things have changed a lot today, but you know how you had the corner dealers all over the place back in the day. Well, that was huge in our area. So I came up with a Sarah model that I was going to buy drugs from these corner dealers, and a mark unit then would come around the corner and pick them up, kind of thing. Obviously, I wanted to buy the dope, and I had some buddies that I went to the academy with that wanted to also get in foot chases with me and catch these bad guys. I mean, it's what we did most nights, so we just added the UC element into it. Um, so I did that, and that was my first experience into the other undercover world. Honestly, it's amazing I didn't get myself killed. The dumb, like I had no training. There was no reason in the world I should have been allowed to do that or doing
wow.
that. Good luck over good tactics in that case, completely.
Yeah, because you're kind of out there in the wind.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's That's crazy, man. So were you at this point? Were you able to like grow your hair out a little bit and do all that, or did you have to be on patrol sometimes?
I had to be on patrol still, so I couldn't really let the hair go. I went to Goodwill, bought some clothes, bought the fake earrings that you couldn't tell were fake, which I didn't have my ears pierced at that point. I didn't get my ears pierced until I did it for vice and narcotics, and didn't really want to get them pierced then. But the one with the first case, it was going to be necessary, so it is what it is.
Right. So
uh,
your first case was with the mafia, right? Is it Italian
yeah.
mafia?
So there was Italian mafia. I was sponsored by the Greek mafia.
The Greek mafia.
Yeah, which they to me are beyond the scariest because they're so much smarter than the rest. They'll never get in all their whole gameplay is extortion and political corruption, and that's exactly what they have in Charlotte. They basically, if you want to open up a club or anything, you had to do it through them, and you had to pay them to make sure everything went okay, that permits went okay, that you got everything okay, that nothing happened to your place.
Really?
And yeah,
Wow. And how
and
did the Greek mafia get established down there?
so there was a pretty large Greek population in Charlotte starting back, I think it was either 70s or 80s. Um, and you give credit where credit's due. Um, Very smart the way everything came about. They started opening up a couple clubs in Uptown Charlotte. And while doing this, they also opened up a bunch of restaurants. Um, Take this as you will, I can tell you no cop ever has to pay in a Greek restaurant. And I don't think it's because maybe people are overly nice, but I don't really think that's the case.
Yeah,
Um,
greasing those wheels.
exactly. And they also getting into politics and getting close friends in political places um, to get free reign, free control.
So how do you get in?
So this case actually, and I started the case totally by accident, and um, again, something I wouldn't ever do on purpose. I blew out my knee. We talked about that for a second earlier. I come back, and especially vice and narcotics, when you come back, if you're gone, like I was gone 4 months, so my informants either went to jail or moved on to somebody else who could continue to pay them.
Right.
So I'm kind of a little bit starting from scratch, except for I mean I had three informants that had been with me early on in my career, but they didn't have anything at that time. I had just started to buy cocaine from a stripper before I got hurt. So trying to drown up some business, I just called her up and see if she would deal with me still, and sure enough, she would. And I'm I'm set up to buy an 8 ball right out the gate, which an 8 ball is 3.5 grams for anybody that doesn't know of cocaine. Very small amount. It's kind of we consider it testing water to make sure everything is good. So I buy this 8 ball from her and I meet up with her, and drug deals are normally the most stressful thing in the whole world, right? Everybody's judging everybody, robbery, police, what's going to happen, um, and they're fast. It's not like drug deals take a long time. Everybody's in a hurry to get this done and get out.
Sure.
Uh, so I meet with her, and she has me get in her car, and she's got the cocaine in a Newport cigarette pack. Hands me the cocaine, and then begins to give me her life story. Like just the oddest thing in the world. Not to mention we're meeting in the richest part of Charlotte, which is obviously not very common for drug deals either.
Right.
And I was just like I'm taken back a little bit, trying to figure things out. She's telling me how she's in school right now. She's going to become a nurse, and just going on and on and on. I literally have to at one point say, "Hey, listen, I got to go." Um,
I got a thing. I
and
got a
yeah, something.
yeah.
And I was like, I may want a lot more. This is just testing, and I forgot to mention. So I knew who her supplier was, and that was my real target. Her main supplier was a who's who drug dealer that I wanted really, really bad. I knew he sold to celebrities. I knew he goes up into the kilo level. He was everything I wanted. Um, so she was like, "Yeah, no problem." And in Charlotte, we would always call it a yak, basically, which is you set up to have dinner or something with the drug dealer to talk, business and have a plan laid out. Everybody gets comfortable with each other when you're talking about large amounts. You don't do it for small amounts, but if you're getting ounces to kilo level, sometimes you'll do a yak. Um, so I end up giving her a call later on saying, "Hey, dope's good. I like it. Um, let's get together and talk and see about how much we can get on the plate, kind of thing." And she said, "Sure." And she names a restaurant that's right by where we met this last time in the expensive area of Charlotte. I didn't know the restaurant, didn't think too
The
much of it.
Parthenon.
Yeah, exactly. Might as well. So I think it was a day later or 2 days later, we go to meet and we're at this restaurant. And of course, I have, close cover guys around me and all that. Um, and I'm sitting down and I'm waiting for her to arrive. And she shows up, and my close cover team catches her before I do. And she's wearing a very, very, oh, speaking of which, the restaurant I'm at that I'm sitting at is, I'm like, wow, this is an expensive restaurant. This is pretty nice.
Yeah,
So I was taken off by that. But hey, I'm not going to pay for the meal, so what do I care? I can thank the city later.
exactly.
But she shows up, gets out of the car, and my phone's blowing up before I even see her. And she is wearing this extremely nice white dress, and she is dressed to the nine. And I glimpse at the text messages coming into my flip phone, and it's, "I can't believe you're on a date. You're using city funds to go out on a date." And I'm like, and I see her, and I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me. This is not happening right now." Um, so she sits down. It takes all of 5 minutes to realize that, yes, to her, this is a date.
Oh
Um,
boy.
and so, my heart's like, this sucks. Um, so I was like, I figured, well, the case is over. I'm gonna, when this is over, I'm gonna sign warrant on her and then go approach her somewhere and see if I can flip her. That's the best case scenario I got, and I'm not hopeful about that. Like, I'm pretty dejected at this point. Um, and then I decided to have a little fun since I figured, well, this is all screwed up. So she starts asking what I do, and I always use the same close backstory. I always use that I'm an orphan, just because I want to close off records to anything when I was younger.
Yeah, it's kind of perfect.
Um, yeah. So I go with that, and that I'm a trust fund. I invested the money and ended up becoming a billionaire. Um, just which was the dumbest thing. Like I'd never do that if I thought anything had potential. But guess I was just in one of those moods at
Having
that
fun.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess I'm a better liar than I realized because she bought it hook, line, and sinker. And I should have also thought out the fact that, well, she's a stripper. They have a tendency to really like money. And if they see a guy that apparently has a ton of money, they're going to latch on that much harder. Um, and that's pretty much what happened. And we get out of that and end up I have a conversation with my SARS and stuff like that. And he had the idea. He's like, well, why do we have to end this right away? And she also invited me to a party. Um, that I figured, the other guy I want to get to is going to be at this party.
How
Um,
does your wife feel about this story now?
oh, she laughs about it. Like
Oh, okay, good.
the girl turns out to be literally crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, but we brainstormed. We decided to bring in another UC to help deal with this because of her attraction towards me. So we bring in another female who is my sister. Um, and anytime I am around this girl, my sister is there, which took a lot of explaining a lot of times why my sister always had to be there, but it worked. And long story, like the stripper ended up not really caring about being with me. She wanted everybody else to think that we were together and for me to think that I'm with her so that she can get all kinds of money and I can pay for everything.
Yeah, sugar
Um,
daddy.
exactly. So it turned out to be beautiful for the case because she's telling everybody, all her stripper friends, "Oh yeah, I'm sleeping with him." So word gets out to everybody, the Greeks, all the other drug dealers and everything else. So, oh well, he's definitely not a cop then. So that part worked perfect. It was a little more tricky later that we had to totally get her out of the picture. Um, that was a little bit complicated and frustrating, but we were able to do it. Um, so she then introduces me to a guy named Marcos, and it's Marcos, friend of the Greeks, is literally how everybody knows him. And Marcos first hits it off with my sister, really well. He seemed to have a little attraction there. And then I get to talk to Marcos, and Marcos and I hit it off. And I would end up spending the next 2 years day and night with Marcos um, and
Weird.
his family. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that must be so weird, dude. To live. I mean, I'm sure a million people have asked you or said this to you, but to live the double life, you know what I mean? Like you're because how you're human, you're gonna like see the good traits in this guy and be like, there's a lot of things I like about this guy. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah, Marcus and I had a great time together. Like, I mean, legitimately, I enjoyed hanging out with him. Uh, the case itself, 80 to 90% of the time, was a blast. Like the work itself was fun. And I'm supposed to be this billionaire, so all of a sudden the FBI is
Yeah, your
helping me
lieutenant is like,
pretending
great, thanks a lot.
to. Oh, I spent so much city money at
I'm
first.
I'm I'm gonna need a Ferrari and a Benz.
Well, see, I did. I got to drive a Porsche. I got to drive a Benz a lot. Um, now they were not city vehicles; those came from the FBI. But
Right, seizures and all that.
yeah, exactly. But so that part of it, I mean, I could not complain. I had legitimately, the first time ever in my life I had surf and turf was in that case.
Oh, it's so
Um,
good, dude. Surf and turf is my,
yeah,
I
the legitimate.
dude. The first time I ever had true surf and turf was at the Capitol Grill in Boston, and the lobster tail on top of a filet mignon, and I would take a little
Yep.
bite of each at the same time with the butter. Oh my! I still think about it. I mean, it's amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. I was just dumbfounded. I couldn't help but many times think if they knew what a schmuck they're dealing with right now, it would be hilarious. I had never had anything like this. I mean, I bought $1,000 bottle of wine. Well, it was actually over $1,000 at the one place. Um, so far out of my element, it was unreal.
Yeah, so cool, man. So where do you go from there? So you're driving
So,
flashy cars. You got the girl.
so Mark and I get closer and closer, and this is what the A&E did the TV show on this case, and then in particular one night. So I'm literally like, I mean, I'm having Sunday dinners with Marcus and his daughters. I mean, we get that close, and he's the one who has to vouch for me. Like Marcus and I set up our original plan was I was opening up two clubs, and Marcus was basically gonna be my go-to. He was gonna sponsor me to the Greeks, and that I would pay him, and he would pay the Greeks, um, and everything would be blessed and ready to go.
Right.
Um, our original plan was he had connections to another country and political connections. And we were going to bring in 50 kilos of cocaine every other week via my plane from his country. That he had the source to bring it in, to get it, and that we'd bring it to Charlotte and store it in this one club, and the other club would be the nice club that everybody would see.
So the
Um,
Greeks weren't just involved in the local politics; they were also moving dope and everything.
no, so this is where things took a turn on me. The Greeks did not. Greeks would not touch the dope at all, and they would get pissed. Um, Like
Okay.
I got sat down a couple times. I got sat down in this case, once by Marcos and once by the Greeks. And the Greeks were basically, you will not be involved in the dope game. There's the other guy that I told you about that originally wanted the stripper supplier. Well, I also ended up getting really close to him in this case as well. He hung out with the Italians. That's how crazy this whole thing was. And they warned me a couple times that if he was doing his deals, and he was allowed to deal in their clubs, which was what was so dumbfounding, but they didn't have any attachment to him. If they're sponsoring him or sponsoring me, they have an attachment to me, so I'm kind of belong to them. Uh, but they yelled at me and said, I will not be involved in the dope game, or they will take care of it. And it was not. I did not feel pleasant about how they would take care
Yeah.
of it. So I walked a very thin line on that one. Marcos was not good about it. And they would get mad at him consistently for it. But he also so Marcos was in his 40s, 50s, I'd say 50s at that time, um, and you would see him with girls in their young 20s a lot, and you would also see them every now and then come up, see him, and then dart off to the bathroom, and then come back a couple minutes later. So I knew he was giving them candy.
Yeah.
Um, so I think he was always on a thin line with them in terms of that, but they also had a great deal of loyalty to him. Um, I had heard, I never found out the real reason they were so loyal to him. I heard a couple stories that I could never vouch where uh, he kept quiet for them and basically almost got killed for them. So I think that had something to do with it. But so that was one of the stressful things about that case is I was constantly going down two roads. I was with Marcos pretty much all the time, and then sometimes it'd be Marcos, Mikey and I. Mikey being the supplier for the stripper, and
So
going to
you're
different part of.
so I understand it
Go
the
ahead.
right way, and everybody's following. You get into the Greeks through the permitting and the sketchy stuff they're doing there. That's your angle with them. But also there's like branches off into like they won't touch drugs, so now you're dealing with the Italian mafia at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, or this guy, Mikey, who was attached to them. Uh,
Wow,
and
this must have
I
been
started,
a lot to
yeah,
process when you're doing it.
it was at first, but then due to other people got so my interest at that time, like my sister was a task force officer with the DEA in this case, not my real sister, the other undercover, and I had been doing work prior to this with the DEA, and so this was going to be a DEA case. When we got the 50 kilos, we're going to come from another country. We had a DEA plane lined up. We were ready to do his DEA, and about 2 days later, Marcos calls me and says, "Hey, come meet me for lunch." He lived in a high-rise condo. He says, "Come meet me for lunch. Let's talk business and get this settled and get things moving," which obviously was great to hear. So I go meet him, and that was the worst lunch. Uh, he goes, I mean, in some ways it was great, but for me, in a lot of ways it was bad. He uh, he goes, "All right, we're going to move on to the next steps. We're going to have to pay some politicians off. We have to get this sponsorship with the Greeks soon, and then we can start doing this. But we can't do those things. We can't move any of the dope until we have this other stuff taken care of with politicians and the Greeks." Um, I get done with the meeting, talking about with the DEA, what was said in the meeting, and they're like, "Well, we're out." And said, "You got to go to the FBI. They have jurisdiction on this because of the politicians and political corruption." So they make a call, and then I end up having to go over to the FBI office, uh, meet with the FBI, and they're like, "We've been trying so long to get in Charlotte and have failed every single time, and this is our ticket." Um, which I mean, at the time I was like, "Oh, sweet, this is gonna be awesome." Um, so then it becomes FBI case, and I'm told at that time just stay the course. We're gonna start looking for another deep cover to bring in. That will be your money man then, but we'll have to go through all the hoops, get everything written up. We have to make it a group one case, like all how it is, all the paperwork, all that crap, and it takes for I couldn't even. I think it took like 6 months to get to have it established as a group one case, and then another 6 months to find an agent, or yeah, an agent to be my money man, another deep cover. Uh, so and then, so in that year time was a state of course and just continue to build the relationship. And I mean, they still funded it. They just used a different pot of money and all that. So,
Because somebody's got to pay for these clubs that
oh yeah,
you're opening, and I mean, and this whole time you're treading water with it, just kind of gathering more evidence and making connections. And
yeah. And I mean, I'm with them 24/7, so I'm constantly spending money out with them, and everything we do. So, but I mean, you know, they took care of the bill. Well, they took care of most of it. My department had paid for it for a while. The state of North Carolina, the SBI was also involved in the case because of some of the on the drug side of things with Mikey and that side. So kind of it did get split up some across the board. So,
so how did each prong of this case end?
so disappointingly, in some to me, to some other people. we Mikey goes to Brazil, and that closes that one off. And honestly, I believe Mikey got himself killed in Brazil. He was trying to find a new connect in Brazil, and I think he screwed up because he kept contact with me while I was in Brazil, and then all of a sudden it just stopped, and nobody ever heard from him again. So
Oh,
not
geez.
a good sign.
Yeah.
uh, and then with Marcos, so I have a horrible night with Marcos one night. I mean, everything worked out, but we go out, we meet about 6 p.m. He tells me to come pick him up at his condo. We're going to this one Greek club, Greek bar slash club. We go there, place I've been to a million times before. Um, but there were so many red flags this night. Like when I pick Marcos up, he's extremely quiet, which is not his style at all. He is always outgoing and talkative. He was very non-private about his phone, as crazy as that is. And then yet this night he was making sure I couldn't see anything on his phone, and he was on it a lot of text messages. It was almost instantaneous that
Hmm.
you're starting to get that bad feeling.
Yeah.
Um, so we go to this first club, place I've been to 100 times. We walk in, know the hostess well, and we always just go sit wherever we want. No big deal. Um, we get there, and she goes, "Up, I have your seats ready." At that point, my anxiety is going up because that's never happened before. There's got to be a reason that she would say, "I have your seats ready." Um, now I'm not particularly happy. So it's on the far side of the bar, which I know the bar well. Right behind me is a curtain that has a little office that's the surveillance office. It has all the cameras in this little office and all this, and you can hear everything that's going on right here. Um, we sit down. We each get a glass of wine. Which he's also a big time drinker, so normally he's downing stuff left and right. He's barely touching anything. He gets up several times with his phone and walks away and is talking on the phone, getting text messages, still not allowed to say anything. He's not saying anything to me. Like maybe 3 words, and it's all questions. Um, so I obviously know something's up, but I don't know what. Um, he takes a phone call, comes back over to me, and he's like, "Come on, we're going uptown to the other clubs." All right. So I drive him up. We go to what's called the epicenter, and the clubs start on the second floor of the epicenter. It's got like 3 levels, and second level starts the clubs. So we walk up the steps, get to the second level, and he says, "Hold on a second." He walks away and gets on the phone again. Um, Comes back over to me and says, "Come on, we're going back to my place, and we'll have a bottle of wine there and talk." And at this point, I'm like, if
Could
I were
you could you
smarter,
could you ask him like what's up with you? Like you're acting weird, or it wasn't weird enough that
yes,
you could do that. It was kind of like borderline.
I probably should have. I hadn't yet though. I was just keeping my mouth shut, just kind of going with it. Um, a smarter man would have probably said something along the lines, "I got to go. I'm flying out," or something like that, and gotten out. It's like this again. I can't say this was smart, but so I go to his condo, and I've been to his condo. I couldn't even tell you how many times prior to this, thousands. Um, he is near the top, and you walk into the condo, open the door. There's a kitchen to your right. You walk past the kitchen. There's a bathroom. Bedroom's on the left with another bathroom attached to it. Living room straight ahead, and then balcony past that. Um, he had always had his lights on and every door open. That's just kind of the way he was. So we get there. We get up to his condo. He opens the door and it's pitch black. And that was I was just like, this is it. I
Oh man.
kind of was thinking I screwed up. Um, and he goes, "Go make yourself comfortable on the couch. I'll get us the wine." Um, I literally walked directly to the balcony and looked down because I was confident I was going to get tossed and I wanted to see where I was going.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and keep in mind too, every door was shut, which is the first time I'd ever seen the door shut in his condo. Um, So go look over the balcony. There is a pool about halfway down. I thought, well, maybe I'll just aim for the pool. I mean, it would have still killed me, but at least it would have been in water.
Right.
Uh, so then I have a seat on the couch. He does. He gets a bottle of wine, turns on a lamp in the living room, um, and sits down. And he starts drilling me with questions. And it's not a bunch of questions, probably like 20 questions, just asked different ways. Same way we would interrogate someone, right? Um, like, where'd you grow up again? What was the name of that orphanage? Who were your friends? Um, what sports did you play? You know, what was the orphanage like? Like he went into that a lot. Then he went into bank accounts. Well, how many bank accounts do you have? What businesses? When did you invest in again? When did you do that? Um,
Oh boy.
all those kind of things. Yeah, exactly. And then several times his phone would go off, and he would get like with text messages. He would look at it, get up, and go in the bath or in the bedroom. And he did the criminal door open and closing, which we've all seen, where you go knock on the motel room door or whatever, and they either barely open it and crack their head out, or they slide out the door so that you can't see in at all.
Right. Like somebody's
Um,
feeding him questions. Make sure you ask him this.
exactly. So that was I knew there were people in there, um, and this literally went on. I mean, I think we got back to his place and started this around 9:10 p.m. Um, Eventually I did say, I was like, man, I hang out with your daughters. We're all friends. Like you and I have been together now for a year or whatever, inseparable, and we've had almost every Sunday dinner together. What is going on? Did I do something that pissed you off? Are you mad at me? What's up? And he was basically showed us, no, everything's fine. Like with no emotion, nothing that helped me at all. Um,
At this point, do you have anybody tailing you
no,
guys?
No. So they had told me later on that close cover would be them being in their office or checking in by text message. They basically, and they're not wrong. I mean, I would have liked them to have worded it differently, but it was basically we're body recovery.
Oh,
Hey,
cool.
just being honest, we're not going to be able to save
Right.
you
Yeah,
probably.
they couldn't sustain that for as long as you're going undercover.
Exactly, and it's more risky to try to tail me and everything else with going to different places, and a lot of these places are very you get noticed in a heartbeat kind of thing.
Right.
Um, so I mean, it is what it is. So eventually, I can see light coming in through the window, and I'm like, "Oh!" Like, and he out of just all of a sudden, all right, you can go. I'll call you later, and that's it. Nothing else. Just you can go. I'll call you later. So the
Weird.
condo we're at, yeah, his condo complex has its own garage. I go down to the garage. I still remember sitting in the car for a second with the key in the ignition and just wondering, if I turn this, is it going to blow up? Is it going to be like one of the movie scenes, right? Is that how this is going to play out? And they had gone through my car. I had know that because my center console was up. Papers like they didn't hide it. Um, so I started the car. It did not blow up, obviously. Thank goodness. And started to drive to the apartment. And um, I get a call then from Marcos. And he's like, nice job. Everything checks out. I'll see you in a couple hours. And we met at the strip club we always meet at it in the morning and go from there. And when I met him, he was back to his normal self. And he says, the Greeks love you. We're good to go. Uh, And so within a
Wow.
couple of days of that, I met one of the heads of the Greeks. Um, you talk about an intimidating guy. That guy was intimidating. Like just your old school. Just I don't even know how to explain it, but you like there was no question he was the boss. Like you
Like
just like
mafioso.
within a second of yeah, exactly to the T. Um, just very. I don't even know how to describe. I'm trying to think of the right word. Um, but he owned the room. Like when he would walk in, he owned anywhere he was. Like it was impressive. Give the guy credit.
Yeah.
So
Damn it. And let me ask you, when all this is going on, this first deep cover thing you're doing, how do they make how do you make time for family? Is it like kind of like I got to catch a flight somewhere or I'm going to be out of town and then you just go like crash with your family, like spend time with them and then recuperate and then go back? Is that how you do it?
well, that would have been nice to do it that way. There were a couple times that I'd hang out with my family outside of the area, but other than that, the first case I'd get home some like, and it didn't do any good. Between 4 to 6 o'clock in the morning. and then back out. But that was it. But every time you go home, it's just so risky. The second case, I just did not do it. Um,
So
it
this
wasn't
first
worth
case,
it
you
to
like
me.
literally did not see your family that almost at all.
No, yeah. Usually, if I saw them, they were sleeping. Um, but at least got to know they were alive. Um, but I did get to communicate with them more in the first case, talk on the phone more. It wasn't as bad as the second case. Second case was just horrendously awful by lack of choice. Um,
Man, that's got to be
but yeah,
so hard.
the tough part is anytime you go home or even go to me, I'm like, if you're getting tailed and you miss it, hey, it's done, and you just gave them who your family is. Um,
Right.
so it just doesn't. It's weird, and I talked about this with my wife. Another hard part, you talk about living the double life. Well, it's not easy to do, and it's not as easy as just going back and forth between two different people. You almost just want to stay as this alter ego until it's done, to avoid screwing up.
Towards the end, was she getting like, or is this going to be over soon? Like, were you able to give her any timeline?
No. So when we thought we were going to have, boy, this happened to me in both of them. Um, I- I've learned you don't ever think it's going to end. Um, I literally would get to mindset, let's just get through today. You can't think you're going to see your family tomorrow. You can't think you're going to see your family next month. You've just got to think about getting through this situation to the next situation. Uh, that's just the way, that was best for my brain anyway. That I can't look at, oh, if I just make it one more month, I'm gonna get to see my family. I just tuned it out and
Do,
basically was like, well, I'm never gonna get to see them again. I
do
just have
you
to have that mindset.
do you think, like, when you look back at this 20, 30 years from now, do you think it was worth it giving up that time with your child and your wife to work the case?
So, and I tell everybody this is, for my personal life, it's the most selfish thing I've ever done. To do that to my family is horrendous. If you boil it down, you can't, and especially the second case more so, even though it was only a year, more so than the first case because there was basically no contact. And then the things I had to do in that case, in terms of I had to be arrested in that case, which made national news. Um, and then my mom had cancer during that case, and she lived where we lived in the same town, and my wife had to handle everything plus my kid. Um, like just unbelievable amounts. So there's no question the selfish. Now, my wife is the reason I stayed in. I almost bailed on the second case. Um, with about 4 months to go, I didn't know about my mom yet, but my kid, who's been no joke since he was born, had basically been the perfect kid. When I blew out my knee, he was only a couple months old at that point. I blew it out. Let's see, he was born in February. I blew it out in April, um, and I couldn't go up and down stairs. And so that night, Reddit goes, um, Caden, that's our son's name, goes, Caden, you're gonna have to start sleeping the whole night. Obviously, he's only 2 months old. He can't understand anything he's saying, but I need you to start sleeping the whole night because I can't. And then
Yeah.
he started sleeping the whole night, literally that night. Never
What
had
an
an issue
angel.
again. Yeah, exactly right. And then in school, he was quiet, but he's always been extremely smart. It's good that way, but always in a good mood. Everything like that. Everything was always really good with him. Uh, I get a call from Reddit in the second case, and I'm on my way to a meeting with some targets, and I she would only call if she felt it was something that needed to be discussed, um, and because it was my UC phone, and so she calls me up and says, one, I'm sorry to call. Um, she goes, I debated whether I was going to tell you this or not, but I didn't want you to be mad at me later on for not telling you. And she goes, Caden's all of a sudden having a very difficult time in school, and he's extremely depressed. Teachers finally asked him what's going on, what's wrong, and he said, "I miss my daddy."
Oh man.
Uh, I pulled off to the side of the road, bawled my eyes out, and I told Retta, I said, "All right, don't worry about it. I'll be home tomorrow. This case is over." Uh, and she goes, "Hold up." She's always good about this kind of thing. And she goes, "I want you to think about the outcome if things go wrong and you come home. Because the reason I got involved in the same case is because they had heard, and I had now at this point had solid information that a group was planning to do a bombing at the DNC in Charlotte. And she goes, if a bunch of officers get killed in a bombing because you bailed out of this case, are you going to be able to live with yourself?
Oh, what a pickle.
Yeah, so I sat on the
Dude.
road, on the side of the road for a minute, bawled for a while, um, called her back and said, I'm staying in the case. Um, I said, and I think I said something like, I'll try to at least stop home for a minute within the next week and see Caden, which I failed to do. But and then I sat there for a little while, and then having to recompose myself and go back to being this other person, like that was the tricky one. That was tricky. Um,
Brother,
and
that is tough.
I was hating life at that point. That case was challenging in every way. Like, I talked about how I enjoyed a lot of the people I hung out with in the first case, criminals or not, whatever. The
Yeah.
company was fun.
Yeah.
There were maybe two people in this case that didn't totally upset me. The person that was Billy was my best friend. Billy was very charismatic to other people, but he was a paranoid schizophrenic on cocaine.
Hey, Matt,
Who, yeah, go ahead.
I want to hear about it. Sounds amazing, but can we wrap up the first one you talked about first with
Yeah,
Marcos?
sorry. Yep.
Yeah, no, because
So, yeah, no, get all over the place. So I deal with Marcos for a long time. Then FBI finds the money man that they want to bring into the picture. That takes a lot longer than we expected. Just lack of trust. They didn't trust, bringing a new person in. This was not how the Greeks play business. Luckily, eventually they said, well, they really liked me. I proved myself to them. If I vouch for this guy, fine, whatever. So we get the money guy in. Still a lot of phone calls for a while, but eventually I'm totally out of the picture. They basically said, well, you know how it is. He's a playboy who wants to go party everywhere else. And they used actually the stripper and said he's got this crazy girl here who won't leave him alone. And he's just tired of it. So you're going to have to deal with me. And eventually that worked. I was able to get out of it. Yeah, I got out of that case August 2011, where I was allowed to go back to the apartment. They put me with the DEA. And then they also that was in that same month that they got the warning about the bombing for the DNC, which was going to be September 2012. And the intel unit met with me and asked me if I'd be willing to attempt to embed or to infiltrate a couple of these groups to at least find out if there's any truth to the bombing. So that's kind of how we switched from one to the other.
did
I
the
came in
Greeks
for
end up?
one.
Did they end up getting the bracelets or?
So the mayor of Charlotte ended up going to jail for federal bribes because we paid him off. There were a couple other people arrested that I don't think I'm allowed to talk about. There were numerous people that should have been arrested that weren't, but that's, I guess, when I finish my part of the case, it's not my decision anymore.
Dude, you must have been so relieved, at least until the next turd sandwich
So,
came your way. I got
so
to ask you, Matt. We've gone in over an hour, and it's been fantastic, man. I've loved listening to it. But are you willing to come back and do a part two? I mean, do you
yeah, I
have
love hanging out with you. Absolutely.
you have time for that? Because I know you're busy and you're doing all kinds of stuff. I don't want to leave the listeners hanging and not have you ever come back.
Yeah,
But
I will definitely come back, man.
I'd love to have you come back and just lay out the second case because it's just so damn interesting, man. It's crazy. And I think the most captivating part about it is like you're like a really good guy. Like you're clearly like a good dude who like just to sacrifice a bunch of himself to do this stuff, and that fascinates me because it's like I'm like a classic copper. I do patrol. I do, I've been doing law enforcement 17 years now at this point, and I'm kind of like I'm no ball of fire and whatever. So when I hear about guys that do stuff like this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, dude. This is like blood money you're getting here. You're like, trading parts of yourself to get these people. And thank goodness people like you do that, and thank goodness for your wife supporting you like that. It's truly incredible because a lot of guys in your position go through wives and have broken families and don't and kind of make it out worse for the wear. You know, the trade off wasn't worth it.
So I had a buddy who had started. He did a 6 months actually with a OMG with a motorcycle gang, undercover with them, and something went wrong, and he had to end up bailing on it. But in just 6 months, he lost his marriage because of it. He was part of it, like, and this was the guy that I idolized when I got to the department. Like, that's who I want to be. That's, I want to do deep cover. That's the guy I want to be. And he is like, he and I are still super close. He's a great, great guy. But he was the one who warned me that, you know, very easily this will cost you everything. I broke one rule in both cases, and I would do it again tomorrow. And um, you're not supposed to talk about the cases with your family. You're supposed to pretty much have them in the dark. Obviously OPSEC, right? You can't talk about these things. I basically said, if I can't trust my wife, then I shouldn't. Number one, I shouldn't be married to her, and
Right.
none of this is worth it. And so she knew way more than she was supposed to know. And I
Yeah.
told her that I was in the strip clubs. That's pretty much where I lived. Um,
You almost got to do that for your conscience. You know what I mean? Like I would have to, like I'd have to,
yeah,
especially being a Christian guy, I'd have to be like, listen, this is part of my vocation. This is what I'm doing. It would feel like bad. You'd feel bad keeping it from her.
exactly, 100%. And if something goes wrong, and that's how she find me, I'd just be like, yeah, I can't do it. So I've got to trust her enough that she knows she can't. And it did. It made it that much tougher on her though, but she did it. She didn't tell anybody. She was really before I went to Vice and Narcotics. She did like CMPD Wives, was one of the founders of CMPD Wives, which was for officers' wives to be able to talk. I lost two very good friends who were in my district were shot and killed while I was there, and that's kind of when CMPD Wives came together because you know we were all obviously devastated, and so they brought that together um, for the wives to be able to talk, so that they had a support group also. So she went from all that to all of a sudden having cut ties with everybody and not talking to anybody because people want to ask, well, where's Matt? Where? Because I literally one day there, next day disappeared, just gone.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's crazy, man. And were you living in relatively a nearby area when you were doing all this?
yeah, not far.
That must have drove you nuts too, because it's like
So close yet so
even just
far away.
running into your neighbor in downtown Charlotte or something. You know what I mean? You do it for long
Yeah,
enough,
so
you're going to see people and kind of put your head down.
that became that became the other struggling part. Even after the cases, was there was no going out. Like we went out with friends one time, not even in Charlotte, but in a neighboring city or town, and we're out to eat, and we literally just sit down. I see somebody walk in that if that person saw me would be big time trouble.
Oh,
Um, so I was basically like, I get up, I don't even have time to explain. And so I get up like I'm going to the bathroom, get out, get into the car, and then call my wife and say, hey, I can't come back in. You guys have a good time. I'm gonna have to wait in the car. Um,
brother, that is. I'd be so pissed off if I were you. You get to one time to go out and be normal and like have some cocktails with friends, and it's like, no, I'll be in the car, have fun.
y'all enjoy.
Oh man, you're a saint, man. That's unbelievable, Matt. Like I said, we're over an hour. I want to respect your time because I know you can talk for another hour about the next thing, and I have questions I didn't even ask you yet. But if you're willing, man, I'd be honored to have you back on, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely we'll schedule it right away.
All right,
I'm
brother.
game.
Thank you so much, man. It was awesome. I'm gonna do the outro and thank the Patreon sponsors. Can you hang on for just a second?
Absolutely.
Awesome. The great Matt Pitchers, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, Matt Pitcher. Unbelievable. I mean, it's so friggin' interesting. Really, really cool. I can see why he's been on TV and why he's, finally coming out of his deep hibernation of social media and starting to blow up. Just so cool. I can't wait to get the part 2 out of him. Thank you again for that, Matt. So awesome. This is a time in the show when I thank the Patreon sponsors, the people that keep the lights on. If you really love the show and you want to show it and, keep the boat afloat. The link is in the show notes. I always appreciate that. I love you guys. Who I'm talking about is the great and powerful Andy Biggs, Greg Gadboy, Adam Mihal, everybody, the great Chris June, Gary Steiner, Jake Pinino, John Shoemaker, the great Lauren Stimson, everyone, the handsome Lane Campbell, Seth Wright, James Rose, the great Tony Fahey, Ben Peters, everybody, Jason Lau, thank you very much, Sasha McNabb, the great Scott Minkler, Tammy Walsh, holding it down at dispatch, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, thank you very much, the great Sean Clifford, Dennis Scaraschio, ladies and gentlemen, Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles, check him out, George Tessier, I'll see you at church, brother, Scott Young, the great Thomas Connell, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, incredible woodworker from North Carolina, check him out on Instagram, Doug and Kelly Newman, I love you guys. See you at church. The great Dave Ellman, Elliot Sykes, Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, brother. Christian, Brad Thompson, the great Kyle Roberts, Zach Haney, the great Nancy Hammond, Clark Lacoff, everybody, Adam McMahon, Ossifer, Andy, thank you very much. The great Sheriff Ronald Long, ladies and gentlemen, Bentley Barnett, the great Jason Labrie, everybody, J.A. Family and Company, and the great Jessica King. Guys, it's a mouthful, and I love it. Thank you so much for your continued support. I truly appreciate that. I love you guys, and I will see you next time.